I discovered my wife's betrayal in the most mundane way possible, a notification on my laptop that she'd forgotten to disable. The message preview was short, just 3 words, "Tonight at 8." But the sender's name made my blood run cold. David Mercier, my business rival. The man who'd spent the last 3 years trying to destroy everything I'd built. My name is Colin Bradford, and I'm a commercial real estate developer in Dallas. I'd spent a decade building my company from nothing into one of the most successful firms in Texas. My wife Ellis managed a high-end boutique in the design district, or at least, that's what I thought she spent her days doing. We'd been married for 5 years. No kids, just 2 people who'd promised each other everything. I'd given her that promise. Apparently, she'd given hers to someone else. Those 5 years had been good, or so I'd believed. We'd met at a charity gala in downtown Dallas. She was working as an assistant manager at a smaller boutique back then, and something about her confidence caught my attention. We talked for hours that night about everything: art, architecture, her dreams of running her own store someday, my plans to expand beyond residential development into commercial properties. Our courtship was quick. 3 months of dating, then I proposed at the same hotel where we'd met. She cried and said yes, and I remember thinking I was the luckiest man in Texas. The wedding was elegant but not ostentatious. 200 guests, a beautiful ceremony at a historic chapel, and a reception that lasted until 3 in the morning. The first 3 years of marriage were everything I'd hoped for. I worked long hours building my business, and Ellis supported me through every stressful deal, every difficult negotiation. When her boutique opportunity came up, a chance to manage a high-end store in the design district, I encouraged her to take it. I even helped her negotiate a better compensation package with the owner. We bought a beautiful house in Preston Hollow, one of those classic brick colonials with a circular driveway and mature oak trees. Ellis decorated it with impeccable taste, mixing modern pieces with vintage finds. Sunday mornings, we'd have coffee on the back patio, reading the newspaper and planning our week. Friday nights were our date nights, sometimes a new restaurant, sometimes a show at the Winspear Opera House. We traveled together, long weekends in New York, a 2-week trip to Italy for our 3rd anniversary, a spontaneous visit to Napa Valley when I closed a particularly lucrative deal. In photos from those trips, we looked happy. We looked like people who belonged together. But something shifted around our 4th anniversary. Small things at first, so subtle I barely noticed them. Ellis started working later, staying at the boutique until 9 or 10 at night. When I'd ask about it, she'd explain that they were preparing for a trunk show or dealing with inventory issues. It made sense. Retail was demanding, and she was ambitious. Then there were the business trips. Ellis had never traveled much for work before, but suddenly she was attending fashion markets in Los Angeles, networking events in New York, vendor meetings in Chicago. She'd be gone for 3 or 4 days at a time, texting me updates about boring meetings and promising to bring back something special. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? We were partners. Other changes were even smaller. She got a new phone and set up a passcode, something about privacy and security after reading an article about identity theft. She started going to the gym more regularly, hiring a personal trainer. She changed her perfume from the Chanel I'd bought her for our anniversary to something new, something with notes of amber and vanilla. When I complimented the changes, she'd smile and kiss my cheek. "Just trying to take better care of myself," she'd say. Our intimate life changed too. We'd always had a healthy marriage in that regard, but over those months, Ellis became distant. She was tired more often, had headaches, needed to wake up early the next day. When we did make love, something felt different. She seemed distracted, somewhere else mentally even when she was physically present. I told myself it was stress. Running a boutique was demanding. I was working long hours too, closing deals and managing my growing company. We were both tired. It happened to every couple eventually, right? Then David Mercier entered our lives, or rather, I learned he'd already been in it. David and I had history. 3 years ago, he'd tried to poach one of my biggest clients by spreading rumors about my company's financial stability. It was all lies, but it cost me months of work to repair the damage. We'd been competing for the same projects ever since, always undercutting each other, always fighting for the same clients. He was smooth, charismatic, the kind of man who could sell ice to someone in a blizzard. He drove a black Porsche, wore expensive suits, and had the kind of artificially white smile you see in toothpaste commercials. I'd always thought he was a snake, the type who'd do anything to win. I had no idea how right I was. About 8 months before I discovered the truth, Ellis mentioned meeting an interesting client at the boutique. This guy came in looking for a gift for his sister, she said over dinner. Spent over $3,000 without blinking. Super charming, very knowledgeable about fashion. I didn't think much of it. High-end retail attracted wealthy clients. It was normal. She mentioned him again a few weeks later. He'd come back, brought friends, spent even more money. He's becoming one of our best customers, she said. The owner is thrilled. I should have asked his name. I should have asked more questions. But I was distracted by a complicated deal in Fort Worth, a mixed-use development that required all my attention. Looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. The way Ellis started dressing slightly differently, still professional, but somehow more polished, more deliberate. The new lingerie I'd find in her drawers, lace and silk in colors she'd never worn before. When I'd ask if it was for me, she'd laugh and say she just wanted to feel good about herself. Our conversations became more superficial. We'd talk about schedules, about bills, about plans for the weekend, but the deep talks we used to have about dreams, about fears, about life, those disappeared. She'd be on her phone more during dinner, apologizing and saying it was work-related. One Saturday afternoon, about 6 months before everything exploded, I came home early from a meeting that had been canceled. Ellis was in our bedroom on a phone call. When she saw me, she quickly ended the conversation. "Who was that?" I asked casually. "Oh, just the boutique owner. Discussing next week's schedule." Something in her voice felt off, but I couldn't place it. She seemed flustered, nervous. But she smiled and kissed me, and I let it go. A few weeks later, I noticed a receipt in her car, dinner at a high-end steakhouse downtown. 2 entrees, expensive wine, dessert. The total was over $400. When I asked about it, she explained she'd taken a potential vendor out to discuss a partnership. It seemed reasonable, but the doubt had planted itself in my mind. Small, barely noticeable, but there. I started paying more attention. Not suspiciously, not actively investigating, just noticing things I'd overlooked before. The way she'd angle her phone away from me when texting. The new habit of showering as soon as she got home from work, even before saying hello properly. The vague answers when I'd ask about her day. "How was work?" "Fine." "Busy." The usual. "Anything interesting happen?" "Not really. Just the normal retail chaos." Where we used to talk for hours, now we barely spoke for minutes. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Tuesday, unseasonably warm for October in Dallas. I'd been working in my home office on a proposal for a major client, a downtown high-rise conversion that could be worth tens of millions. Ellis was supposedly at the boutique for a late inventory count. Around 9:30, I went to the kitchen for coffee. My laptop was in the living room, where I'd left it that morning. Ellis and I both used it occasionally for personal things, checking email, browsing, online shopping. I'd opened it to check something when the notification popped up. Her email account was still logged in. She must have checked it that morning and forgotten to log out. The notification preview showed the sender, David Mercier. The subject line, "Can't wait." The message preview, "Tonight at 8. My stomach dropped. David Mercier. My rival. My enemy. Sending my wife messages. I should have closed the laptop. I should have waited for her to come home and asked her directly. But something made me click. The email opened, and with it, my entire world collapsed. "Ellis, tonight was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. Same hotel room tomorrow. I'll bring that wine you liked. Wear the red dress. D." I sat there, staring at the screen, reading those words over and over. My hands started shaking. My vision blurred. I scrolled up. There were dozens of emails. Hundreds, maybe. I clicked on the earliest one, dated 8 months ago. "It was wonderful meeting you at the boutique today. I know this is unconventional, but would you like to have dinner sometime? Just to talk more about fashion, and maybe other things? David." Her response had been cautious at first. Professional. But I could watch the progression, email by email, as the relationship evolved from friendly to flirtatious to something much darker. By email 50, they were discussing hotel rooms. By email 100, the messages were explicit, detailed, leaving nothing to imagination. But it wasn't just the affair. As I kept reading, something worse emerged. "Did you get those contracts we talked about?" David had written 3 months ago. "He keeps them in the home office. I'll photograph them tomorrow when he's at work," Ellis had replied. My blood went cold. I clicked through more emails, my horror growing with each one. Ellis had been feeding David confidential business information. Client lists, bid amounts, development strategies, financial projections. Everything I'd worked for, every deal I'd been pursuing, she'd been reporting back to him like some kind of corporate spy. That's why David had been able to undercut my bids for the past 8 months. That's why he'd stolen 3 major clients. That's why every move I made seemed to blow up in my face. My own wife was sabotaging me. I sat in that living room until midnight, reading every email, every message, documenting everything. I took screenshots, I forwarded emails to my personal account, I saved everything to a flash drive. When Ellis came home at 12:30, 90 minutes after the boutique closed, she found me sitting in the dark, laptop open. "Colin? Why are you sitting in the dark?" She flipped on the light, and I saw her clearly. Her makeup was freshly applied. Her hair was perfect. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. "How was inventory?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "Exhausting. We're way over on summer stock." She kicked off her heels and headed toward the stairs. "I'm going to take a quick shower and head to bed." A shower? Of course. To wash away the evidence of wherever she'd actually been. I didn't confront her that night. Something stopped me. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was strategy. I needed to know the full extent of what she'd done. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went. I didn't sleep that night. I lay next to my wife, this woman I'd loved for 5 years, and realized I didn't know her at all. The person sleeping beside me was a stranger. A liar. A thief. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. After Ellis left for the boutique, I started investigating. I didn't confront her immediately. That would have been foolish. Instead, I did what any smart businessman would do. I gathered information. The notification had come from her personal email, which she'd left logged in on the shared laptop. I started reading. The affair had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of lies, of late nights she'd blamed on inventory issues, of weekends she'd claimed to spend with her sister in Houston. The emails were detailed, intimate, and worst of all, strategic. David wasn't just sleeping with my wife. He was using her. "Did you get the contracts?" one email read. "He keeps them in the home office. I'll photograph them tomorrow," she'd replied. My hands shook as I scrolled through message after message. She'd been feeding him confidential information about my business deals, my clients, my strategies. Every move I'd made in the past 8 months, David had known about it in advance. That's why he'd been able to undercut my bids, why he'd stolen 3 major clients, why suddenly every deal I touched seemed to fall apart at the last moment. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything, had been systematically dismantling my life's work while lying beside me every night. I printed everything. Every email, every message, every document. Then I called my attorney Marcus Chun, the best divorce lawyer in Dallas and a personal friend. "Colin," Marcus said when he finished reading the evidence, "this is worse than infidelity. This is corporate espionage. She's been stealing proprietary information. Can we use this?" He smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. "Oh, we can do better than use it. We can end both of them." But I wasn't ready to move yet. I needed to know the full extent of the damage. Marcus connected me with a private investigator named Sarah Rodriguez, a former corporate fraud specialist who'd helped several of his clients before. Within a week, Sarah had uncovered something that made the affair look like a minor detail. Ellis and David hadn't just been stealing information, they'd been forging documents. Using stolen copies of my signature and company seals, they'd been transferring properties into shell companies that David controlled. 3 of my most valuable commercial properties were no longer legally mine. "They've stolen approximately $18 million in real estate," Sarah said, showing me the documentation. "And it's all been done so carefully that it looks legitimate on paper." Ellis came home that evening like nothing was wrong, kissing my cheek and asking about my day. I smiled and asked about hers. She told me about a difficult customer and a new shipment of designer dresses. She was good at lying. 5 years of marriage, and I'd never suspected she could be this good. "Marcus needs everything documented," Sarah had told me. "Every interaction, every lie. The more rope you give them, the more they'll hang themselves." So I played along. For 3 more weeks, I pretended to be the devoted husband while Sarah and her team built an airtight case. We traced every forged document, every fraudulent transfer, every stolen file. David had made one critical mistake. He'd gotten greedy. The shell companies he'd created had patterns, connections that Sarah's forensic accounting team could follow. Meanwhile, I quietly moved my legitimate assets into protected trusts. I transferred funds to accounts Ellis didn't know existed. I documented every joint asset, every shared account, every piece of property we'd acquired during our marriage. "I need to show you something," I told Ellis one evening, exactly 28 days after I'd discovered the first message. She looked up from her phone, probably texting David, with false concern. "What is it, honey?" I opened my laptop and turned it toward her. On the screen was a photo of her and David entering a hotel room. The timestamp read 2 days ago. Her face went white. "I know everything," I said calmly. "The affair, the stolen documents, the forged transfers, all of it." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. "Don't bother lying," I continued. "I have 8 months of emails, text messages, hotel receipts, and bank transfers. I also have testimony from 3 witnesses who saw you and David at various properties, signing papers you had no authority to sign." "Colin, I can explain. I don't want your explanations. I want you out of my house. Tonight." She started crying then, the performance I'd expected. The tears, the apologies, the promises that it meant nothing, that she loved me, that David had manipulated her. "Save it for your attorney," I said. "You'll need a good one." The next morning, Marcus filed for divorce. But that was just the opening move. By noon, I'd filed a lawsuit against David Mercier for corporate espionage, fraud, and theft. The evidence Sarah had compiled was devastating. Emails proving he'd knowingly received stolen proprietary information, forged documents with my signature, and fraudulent property transfers. But I wasn't done. I'd spent 3 weeks talking to David's business partners, his investors, his clients. I'd shown them, confidentially, with proper legal documentation, exactly what kind of man they were working with. A man who would seduce another man's wife to steal business secrets. A man who would forge legal documents to steal millions in property. By the end of the week, David had lost 4 major investors and 2 of his biggest clients. His credit lines were frozen pending investigation of the fraudulent transfers. His reputation in Dallas real estate was destroyed. Ellis tried to reconcile. She called, texted, showed up at my office. She claimed David had manipulated her, that she'd been foolish, that she still loved me. "You stole from me," I told her during our final conversation. "Not just my trust, but my work, my business, my future. You helped another man rob me while pretending to love me. There's no coming back from that." The divorce proceedings were brutal for her. With the evidence of her participation in the fraud, she had no leverage. Marcus argued that she'd violated the marriage contract through both infidelity and criminal conspiracy. Every joint asset we'd acquired during our marriage, the judge awarded to me. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed 5 years ago became her worst nightmare. She'd get nothing from the marriage except her personal belongings and whatever she could carry. But the real revenge came 6 months later. The forensic accounting had revealed something beautiful. In their rush to steal my properties, Ellis and David had made technical errors in the paperwork. The shell companies they'd created to hold the stolen assets. Legally invalid. The transfers? Fraudulent and reversible. With Sarah's documentation and Marcus's legal expertise, we proved in court that every single property transfer had been obtained through fraud. The judge ordered everything returned, plus damages. David Mercier's company collapsed. The lawsuit, the loss of investors, the return of the stolen properties, and the legal fees destroyed him financially. His business filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks after the final court ruling. Ellis lost everything too. Her boutique closed. Turned out it had been partially financed by David using my stolen money. Her reputation was ruined. Nobody in Dallas society would work with or associate with a woman who'd helped steal millions from her own husband. She moved back to her parents' house in Oklahoma. I heard she was working as a sales associate at a department store, making a fraction of what she'd spent monthly during our marriage. David left Texas entirely. Last I heard, he was trying to restart his career in some small town in Arizona, working for someone else's firm at an entry-level position. As for me, my business recovered stronger than ever. The publicity from the case, carefully managed by a PR firm Marcus recommended, positioned me as the wrong party who'd fought back and won. Clients respected that. Investors trusted someone who could outmaneuver corporate espionage. I bought a new house, a modern glass and steel place overlooking the lake. No memories, no ghosts, just clean lines and new possibilities. Sometimes people ask if I miss being married. The truth is, I miss who I thought Ellis was. I miss the woman I believed I'd married. But that woman never existed. She was just a performance, a mask hiding someone who could smile at me over breakfast while planning to rob me blind. The real Ellis, The one who could betray everything for money and another man's empty promises. I don't miss it all. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter from her. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Dear Colin, it read. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't expect you to. I just wanted you to know that David left me the moment everything fell apart. He blamed me for getting caught, said I was careless with the emails. Everything he promised me was a lie. You were right about him, about everything. I destroyed the only real thing I ever had for a fantasy. I hope someday you find someone who deserves you, because I clearly didn't. I'm sorry. I burned the letter in my fireplace and never thought about it again. The thing about betrayal is that it teaches you who people really are. Ellis showed me she was willing to destroy her husband for money and excitement. David showed me he was willing to use anyone for business advantage. And I showed them both that there are some lines you don't cross without consequences. People sometimes say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is best served systematically, legally, and completely, with documentation, witnesses, and a very good attorney. 3 years after the divorce, my company has doubled in size. I've expanded into commercial development in 3 new states. I even started dating again, a corporate attorney named Jennifer who understands that trust is something earned, not given. Life is good. Better than it was when I was married to a woman who saw me as a mark instead of a husband. And somewhere in Oklahoma, Ellis is probably ringing up someone's purchase at a department store, wondering how she went from designer boutiques and stolen millions to minimum wage and her childhood bedroom. That's not cruelty. That's consequences. She made her choices. She helped David try to destroy me. They both gambled that they were smarter, faster, more careful than I could ever be. They were wrong. And now they both know that some mistakes don't deserve forgiveness. They deserve exactly what you get. Thank you for watching the video to the end. YouTube may no longer suggest my channel to you, so subscribe to it to receive new interesting stories. You will also help the channel grow and improve the quality of its content. A playlist with other interesting stories that you can listen to is now displayed on the screen. You can also write in the comments what stories you would like to see on the channel.